Dr. Sarah Nichols, why I quit being a full-time doctor.
Why did I quit my full-time job as a doctor? Why have I quit my full-time training in medicine? Why have I jumped off the career ladder that I worked so hard to get onto? I'm Dr. Sarah, I'm a medical doctor and an online coach. We're going to start by me explaining why I quit, why I jumped off the career ladder, why I've quit being a full-time doctor.
Common theme, isn't it?
Just to give a little bit of context, in the UK, when you graduate from medical school and become a doctor, you have to do 2 years of foundation training. When you finish that, you can apply to specialty training. And that is the point at which I quit full-time medicine. I dropped out of being a full-time doctor. I became a locum doctor with the intention of applying to specialty training, but I just never did. I never jumped back on that career ladder. I've never applied for specialty training. Now I work as a locum, which is the equivalent of like a school supply teacher. I pick up shifts as and when they're available.
So for those in the US, remember, UK slightly different training system. So they do essentially 2 years of foundation training, which is like MS4 plus intern year of residency, your first year of residency combined. And then you specialize, then you apply to whatever specialty you want to do. Here in the US, you finish your 4th year of medical school, and then you go and do your specialty training in whatever residency, whatever specialty you matched into. So sometimes that first year can be a general intern year, like a preliminary year, a transitional year, and you'll go through a lot of different specialties. Other times that first year can be specific. It's still very broad, covering a lot of things, but it can be specific to your specialty. So I went into plastic surgery. It's a 6-year program. And in my first year, I was doing a lot of different things, but I also did 3 months of plastic surgery specifically. But the key thing here is that after that 1 year of residency in the US, your intern year, plus passing step 3, the final USMLE board exam, then you're able to actually do certain doctor jobs, things like urgent care, things where you don't have to be a board certified specialist. So my understanding is similar thing there, where after doing 2 years of junior doctor training, then you can also go and do these unspecialized roles.
Why I decided to quit. When I finished my foundation training, I was exhausted, exhausted, burnt out. I was so tired. To be honest, I was pretty unhappy. Every week I was counting down until my days off work. I was so tired and exhausted. And if you look back at any of my vlogs, all I was talking about all the time was just how tired I was. Every video I was like, oh, I only managed 4 hours sleep. I was just running on empty. And I used to joke in my videos that my life was held together by cortisol, caffeine, and dry shampoo. And that wasn't really a joke. That really was the case. I was so tired.
Your training years are going to be much more challenging than your attending years, and both the US and the UK do have work hour restrictions. In the UK, it is actually a lot less than in the US, but still, programs can sometimes go over those hours, and even within those hours, it's pretty challenging. I think in the UK, it's down to 48, and it used to be 56 before. In the US, it's 80. And keep in mind, that's like work time. That doesn't count the time you're studying at home, preparing for next day's cases, preparing for your presentations in grand rounds that next week, things like that.
I'm gonna get my journal out, my trusty journal, and I'm gonna run through the things that I wrote down that I didn't want. Didn't want to work so many hours and sacrifice my health.
I do think for a lot of people, it's hard to not sacrifice your health in some way during your training, because the hours can be pretty brutal. Again, part of it's going to depend on where you're training, what country you're in, even within a country, what state or city, and also what specialty. So keep those things in mind. But let's use neurosurgery as an example, because neurosurgery in the US has by far the most ridiculous training hours. If you're in the hospital for over 100 hours a week, you're not sleeping your 8 hours every night, you're not exercising daily, you're doing a lot of things that are not good for your long-term health, and neurosurgery has the longest residency of 7 years. So 7 years of that kind of lifestyle, and sure, there's going to be pockets of it being a little bit more tolerable, a little bit less tolerable, depending on the rotation. You may do a research year, whatever. Still not good.
I didn't want to have my time off dictated to me by somebody else.
Yeah, so there's essentially 3 things there. You can either be a full-time salaried employee, and if you're working as a doctor, yeah, you're oftentimes, especially in training, working pretty challenging hours and working 6 days a week often at times, at least in the US. Then the middle is like being locums, which sounds like what she did, where you were deciding when you are working and when you are not working ahead of time. And then the third thing is being an entrepreneur, which I like to say is just you deciding to work 24/7.
I didn't want to miss out on life events and milestones.
Yeah, so the milestones and life events, when you're in your training, you have times you need to be working, and there isn't really much leeway. So you will miss holidays, you'll miss Christmas, Thanksgiving, you'll miss anniversaries, you'll miss weddings, you'll miss a lot of things.
I knew I didn't want to be tired all the time. Huge one for me.
And I don't want everyone watching to think that if you're going to become a doctor, you have to be tired all the time. Again, there are different training programs in different countries, different cities, different specialties. My buddy who did family medicine, as an example, he lived a great lifestyle during med school and in residency, right? My buddy who did neurosurgery, not so much. So part of that is how challenging your training is. But then part of that is also how you just manage your time. And we talk about that ad nauseum on the Med School Insider channel, because I do think it is a huge, huge, huge underappreciated aspect in dealing with an imperfect system. I think medical training is absolutely broken, but demanding that it changes tomorrow is not really realistic. Instead, what you can change tomorrow is your own time management, your sleep optimization, things like that. If you're gonna sleep only 5 or 6 hours, that sucks, but can we make that more restorative than it is right now? Those are the things that we explore on the Med School Insiders channel, and we've also explored on this channel a few times.
I knew I didn't want to be the kind of friend, partner, or family member I was when I was working full-time. I felt flaky, exhausted, not present, and anxious.
You're gonna be flaky because you'll think you're getting out at 5 or 6 p.m. and then an ED consult comes in right before you clock out. And you're not gonna let your co-resident, your buddy, just handle that on their own because they're already really swamped. So you go in and then you stay there and help them, and now it's 9 or 10 p.m. when you get out and you miss that thing that you were supposed to do. And you may say, oh, like forget your co-resident, whatever. Kind of a dick move. And plus, when the roles reverse and they're wondering whether or not to help you wanna be on their good side, right? Just, you help people out because it's challenging when you're on call.
A lot of the time I would say yes to things, and then I would cancel at the last minute because I was just so tired or anxious.
And that too, or you'd be tired.
Not present. This was also a big one because I felt like when I was at work, I was daydreaming about not being at work. When I was off work, I was stressing about being at work. I was never fully present wherever I was.
I can relate to the presence, not in the same way. I think when I was at work, I definitely was at work very present. I think part of that is also going into a specialty that you do enjoy, or doing rotations that you enjoy, because I was definitely much more present even as a med student in certain things, and definitely a lot less in other specialties, which I've talked about elsewhere on this channel. But I feel the thing that made me less present was I was micromanaging my time to a degree that wasn't healthy. And as an example, I was doing a long distance relationship and I would be FaceTiming, but then I always had to be doing something during the FaceTime call because otherwise it would be wasted time, which obviously didn't make my partner at the time feel good. So I would be like folding laundry or doing something else until she told me, hey, can you not do that? Or even things like eating. I would go to restaurants and I'd be studying my flashcards while I was at the restaurant, because I was doing a surgical residency in the US. So you're working 80 hours per week regularly. Plus I was building 2 companies at the time. So not an intelligent thing to do, not a realistic thing to do, not a sustainable thing to do, which is why I made the decision that I did to leave residency. But presence is important. And if you're one of those type A, achievement-driven kind of people, you may downplay the importance of presence, but it catches up to you eventually, right? And it can suck out the joy from relationships, from just simple things like eating a meal and like being present and enjoying your meal versus trying to be productive during your meal.
My goodness, I was so anxious when I was working full time. I am the kind of person who suffers with anxiety when I get really tired. And it was a bit of a vicious cycle for me because I was so tired that I struggled to sleep, and then that would make me more anxious, and it was just a self-perpetuating cycle.
Yeah, anxiety when you're trying to fall asleep is the worst. I've had sleep onset insomnia on and off since I was young, and just laying in bed being like, damn, I can't sleep, makes it worse that you can't sleep, which sucks. Clearly me and Sarah are very different people, and our experience of medical training was very different, which doesn't make either one of ours invalid, right? Just both are valid, but just different. For me, when I was really tired from being sleep deprived and overworked, etc., both in med school and in residency, I actually was able to fall asleep a lot faster. And it was only on rotations or during times when I was getting my 7 to 8 hours of sleep where I was like, yeah, I guess I do need to focus on my sleep hygiene to make sure I can fall asleep and not have insomnia. So again, people are different, but when I'm sleep deprived, I guess the silver lining, if you can call it that, is it's a lot easier for me to just fall asleep when I get in bed.
I was struggling to keep my hobbies, do the things I wanted to do outside of work. That meant that I just felt like the only role in my life was being a doctor, and that felt quite stifling. I didn't want to just identify as being a doctor. I also realised in later years that I didn't want the job of my bosses in emergency medicine where I work, The consultants often don't see a lot of patients. They're taking a bird's eye view of the department. They're doing lots of sort of management role. They're supporting and supervising the doctors. I'm sure it's very fulfilling, but I went into medicine to be able to see patients. That is the thing I really love. And when I look at the job of a consultant, I feel it's just not what I want to be doing.
Pre-meds, that point right there is key. If you are shadowing physicians, attending physicians, so consultant is the attending version in the UK. First of all, try different specialties because not all specialties are going to be the same. But if you're shadowing attending, then you're like, I do not want to be doing this in the future, then why are you going to med school? Okay? And med students, if you are looking at attendings when you're deciding on a specialty, keep that in mind as well. Really focus on the day in and day out, not just the sexy thing that you see once in a while here or there, the zebras, right? What's the bread and butter, the thing that you're seeing most days? What do most of your days look like in that specialty? That'll give you so much clarity with regards to which specialty to pursue. And if you are already in medical school and you're deciding, I don't want to be an attending physician, I don't want to complete a residency, that's okay too. We have a whole video on that process, stepwise, how to approach it. And for most of you, not all of you, but for most of you, you should probably still try to complete your med school, get your MD or your DO.
Those are the things that made me want to quit my full-time job as a doctor. So how have I come to peace with the decision? I've done a lot of soul searching, and I'm guessing if you're watching this video that maybe you're in the same position. I wish that when I was having these kinds of thoughts that there were videos like this that I could watch. So here are some of the things that I felt scared about. So number one, job instability. There are no guaranteed shifts as a locum doctor. There's no guaranteed pay. There's no sick pay, no paid annual leave, no maternity leaves. These are risks that you take. Often locum doctors get paid more per hour because of all of these things.
Because then you're paying your own insurance, your own benefits, right? So that's just part of the trade-off. Realize that's the reality. You're getting much more flexibility, but you're not getting as much stability, benefits, etc. Same thing for those who decide to go into entrepreneurship.
Number two, judgment from myself. I kept saying to myself things like, I've worked so hard to get here. Am I wasting all of my training?
Yeah, sunk cost fallacy for me was more about making the decision. Once I made the decision, I guess, again, we're wired differently. I didn't really have much judgment about it. I was like, cool, I made the right decision based on, I spent a lot of time on this. I made the right decision. Judgment of other people, don't give a fuck. Judgment from me, I know I did the due diligence to make the best decision.
Number three, judgment from others. Judgment from colleagues, friends, family, etc.
Doesn't fucking matter. I mean, when you're in your 20s, you care a little bit more. You get to your late 20s, to your 30s, you're like, who cares? The people who really matter in your life, they're gonna support you no matter what. And those who are gonna give you shit, obviously, you don't need in your life.
Number four, would I regret the decision? Would I regret not giving it my all and going all the way to the top? I kept hearing the phrase, it's only another few years. That's something that just seems to always go round in medicine. Just another few years, just another few years, just keep pushing through. How did I get over these fears? How did I come to a decision where I was comfortable with jumping off the career ladder and not being a full-time doctor anymore? To be honest, it took a long time to get to this place. I feel like I've had to do a lot of soul searching, and I've had to go on a bit of a personal development journey to really get to know who I am at my core and how I make decisions, what's important to me. And that has transformed my life and has made this decision an easy one. I know who I am now on a deep level. I know what I want, and I am very clear about what I will and won't accept in my life.
A lot of us don't have that, and getting that clarity is gonna make whatever decision you have about your career so much easier. So for those who don't have that clarity, some things that have helped me, and I'm no expert on this, I'm just gonna share with you what's helped me. Number one is doing a lot of journaling, introspection, because if you just think in your head, the ideas, they kind of bounce around, they kind of make sense. You make these logical leaps that you wouldn't in writing. Writing forces you to clarify and organize your thoughts in a better way. It helps solidify them in a way that you're not gonna do in your head. So that's number one. Number two is talking to others, whether that's friends, family, therapists, etc. Like deep conversations many, many times, not just one conversation, but over time, how do things evolve? And then number three, doing some personal development courses, workshops, things that are kind of organized and structured. Reading books or listening to audiobooks can help here too, but having the group environment can sometimes be more of an accelerant. And ultimately, I think a lot of this is a lifelong process, like continuing to learn more about yourself, continuing to try to improve yourself in various ways. But I do think you get also a tremendous amount of noob gains in the early stages of this process that can be very, very illuminating.
But honestly, changing my mindset and up-leveling myself has been transformative. Going back to those 4 things that I felt like I was scared of, here's how I reasoned with those fears. And I'm just going to say, those fears that I had were very real and very valid. And if you're feeling any of those things at the moment about your own career, that is totally okay. Like, it's okay to be scared about those things.
By the way, the fear setting exercise is what I did, and working through fears, it's a really great practice that I actually learned from Tim Ferriss. He has a TED Talk about it right up here. And you can also see my process of me going through it and deciding to actually leave my plastic surgery residency in that previous video as well. It's essentially a construct to help you work through your fears, understand what could possibly happen, and then how to cap the downside to make sure that the bad thing doesn't happen. And if it does, how do you actually recover from it? And it helps to put into perspective your fears, and more often than not, realize that your fears are greater in your mind than in reality.
So number 1, job instability. I was scared about the fact that there wasn't any sick pay, there wasn't annual leave pay, those kinds of things. So how did I reason with that? I've created my own safety net. I've saved up my own money, creating self-trust, being able to rely on yourself, living below your means, saving a pot of money.
Yeah, what I'm hearing there is, number 1, financial discipline, not wasting money you don't have, allowing yourself to have that safety net, that emergency fund. And then number 2, building agency, building the confidence by doing the hard things, by having the experiences, the proof to say, hey, I've done harder things before, I can handle this as well.
Number 2, judgment from myself. How did I overcome this? I took control of the narrative. So I've decided that I trust myself so deeply that I know that I am making the best decision for me, and just really leaning into that idea.
Yeah, the thing here is, like, everything in life, it comes down to a story that we tell ourselves. So Shakespeare, right? Nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Whatever story you tell yourself, don't be delusional, but I like to say that there's a range of truths, right? And someone can argue this end of the truth, another person can argue this end of the truth, but we know that beyond those boundaries is definitely not true. So within these bounds of what the truth is, so if you try to run a marathon and you do this training, but you fall off and you end up not being able to do the marathon, you run half the marathon, and then you need to call it quits or whatever. There are different interpretations that could be valid. So you could say, hey, I suck, I'm a failure, I'm not disciplined enough, I didn't stick to the plan. Okay, you could argue that, but does that serve you? Obviously not. Alternatively, you could say, hey, I set out to do this thing, I didn't hit the goal, but I learned, I pushed my boundaries, my fitness is higher, yada yada. Like, there's different ways to interpret these things. Choose the reality that serves you.
I also like to remind myself that nothing is wasted, not even my medical training. Even if I decide to drop out of being a doctor altogether, nothing is wasted. I think back to things that I did in my past, like I worked at McDonald's. I used to work in a college, in the admissions department, all sorts of different jobs before I became a doctor. And every single one of those has helped me grow and learn. And it's only through looking back and seeing all the lessons that I have from each of those different jobs and the people that I met there, that I realized that every single one of those things has made me the person that I am today.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think that even if I wasn't doing medical education, my medical training wouldn't be wasted because I learned a lot of things about work ethic and studying and just learning how to learn is a meta skill that makes everything else in the future that you want to learn easier. The list goes on. 3,
judgment from others. How did I overcome that? Well, I had to make a firm decision that I am the main character in my life, and that I'm not going to let other people's judgment determine what I do and don't do in my life. I read the book, The Courage to Be Disliked, and if you're the kind of person who worries about what other people think of you, stop right now, go and download that book, go and order it from Amazon or from your local bookshop. It's amazing.
All right, some advice for you. Be mindful of the kind of person you are. There are certain people out there that do not need to read a book like that because you probably need to do the opposite and care more what people think. And there are others who, like Sarah, would benefit from a book like that, where you should care less what people think. Wasn't really my priority when it came to career decisions at all.
Before, will I regret it? How did I come to terms with that? I've decided that regret is a choice. We can look back on our decisions and decide to regret them or be at peace with them. And I choose not to make regret a feature of my life. I've developed the skill of trusting myself to make the best decision in the moment, and that if that decision turns out to not have been the best option, that I'll be able to figure it out.
Yeah, and a more practical thing there to add is you can make decisions that minimize the chances of regrets or give you options to then go back and undo that thing. So depending on what you're quitting from, oftentimes you can go back to it. So me quitting plastics, no, I can't ever go back to plastics. That is one thing that I thought very long and hard about. But for Sarah, it sounds like she could always go back and then apply for her specialization afterwards is the sense I'm getting from her video. That's why for those who are in med school right now, who reach out to me saying, hey, I'm considering quitting and they want my advice, more often than not, I tell them, hey, unless there's a really, really good reason, mental health, etc., for you to quit right now, try to finish. Because once you quit, not getting back into med school, or at least it's going to be very, very difficult, and it's probably not going to be worth the effort at that point in the future.
That's how I reasoned with all the fears that I have, and I'm more driven now by the things that excite me. So I think about the opportunities that I have through being a locum. I get to have more time freedom. I get to have more chance to travel, to spend time with friends and family. When I go to work now, I am excited, I'm enthusiastic, I'm happy to be there. I'm no longer exhausted and tired and dreading it and wishing for the weekend. I love my job as a doctor and I feel so much more fulfilled now.
Great video, Sarah. My friends, let me know what you think about the comment below.